Good morning, guys, and it's good to see uh, Ken and Ginger. And matter of fact, that was kind of like my intro into my Devo this morning because I was looking at some statistics from 2022, and they said that the gambling industry in the United States uh, profit last year, 2022, was $60 billion. And I went back and started researching some other countries in our world. And there's 119 countries where their gross national product or income is less than $60 billion. And
Wow.
so as we live in a nation, uh, the United States of America, one nation under God. And I was just thinking, how could we, participate in gaming to the point where we have an industry to be able to net $60 billion in a year. It's a game of chance. And what Ken was saying about how we can expose Christ to our nation and 5 billion people. And I said, wow, that's really, really cool. But the other thought is, how could we
Mhm.
in this country spend that much money when every week we have churches that close their doors, for the final time? I don't know whether you ever heard of this writer or not. His name is David Foster Wallace. And unfortunately, he committed suicide, but not before he did this speech. This was a commencement speech that he did in 2005, and I'm just going to read a little excerpt from it. He said, because here's something else that's weird but true. He said, in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There's no such thing as not worshiping. He said, everybody worship. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it Jesus Christ or Allah. He said, even if we just decide to just have ethical principle, he said that's pretty much everything else you worship will eat you alive. He said, if you worship money and things, even if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Notice what he says. He said, if you worship money, you will never have enough. It's the truth. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally bury you. He said, on one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myth, proverbs, cliches, parables. He said, the skeleton of every great story. The whole trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. He said, if we worship power, we will end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. He said, if you worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. He said, but the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they are evil or sinful, it's that they are unconscious. They are default settings. He said, that's the kind of worship you just gradually slip into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. And he said, and the so-called real world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings, because the so-called real world of men and money and power hums merrily along in a pool of fear and anger and frustration and craving and worship of self. He said, our own present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom all to be lords of our tiny skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. He said, this kind of freedom has much to recommend it. But of course, there are still different kinds of freedom. And he said, the kind that is most precious you will not hear much about in the great outside world of wanting and achieving. He said, the really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and being able truly to care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in unsexy ways and to do it every day. He said that is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant knowing sense of having had and lost some infinite things. So these are the words of David Foster Wallace that he did at a commencement exercise. And I said, if you Google him, you can see that, have that speech in its entirety. But if you keep up following him, he ended up committing suicide. So I don't know what demons, that he had or what possessed him. But I said he hit on certain things that are just so true about how we unconsciously worship money, power, intellect, beauty, all of these other things. And even though we may not know it, the equal sign or the consummate sign is how is it that how we act? How do we act toward money? How do we act toward beauty? How do we do all of this? And so that ended up bringing me to John, the 15th chapter and verse 1, where Jesus says, I am the true vine. And when I've read this before, it's almost like saying I am a male, I am an investor. But when Jesus says, I am, think back in the book of Exodus, where God had come to Moses and told him to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. And Moses asked God, he said, well, if I'm going to tell him, who should I say sent me? And God said, tell him, I am that sent you. So here Jesus went on John the 15th chapter. This was the week of his crucifixion. And he had taken his disciples aside. And this is what he said to his disciples, again, a day or two before he's crucified. He said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. And this is what Jesus said. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. And, just look at that picture. Here's this vine, and it has branches. And the branches aren't dead. All of them look the same. This is a branch here, and there's a branch there, and there's a branch there. But this is what the gardener does. He said, he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. He said, if you connect it to this vine, and this vine is giving you everything you need to be fruitful and to multiply, and yet you get in all of this, and at the season of harvest, of the season where you should be grapes on there, Jesus is saying nothing is there. But he said, God will not leave you there. He said he will cut off these branches that bear no fruit. He said, while every branch that does not bear fruit, he prunes so that it will even be more fruitful. So God is the vine, and we are the branches. And there's things that we should do with the power that he's providing for us. Romans 12:2, Paul says, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and the perfect will of God. Guys, we have a mission, and our mission is to be fruitful. Our mission is to glorify God. God created us just for that sole purpose, to glorify him. So when we go through life and we send our kids to college and everything else like that, and we want them to get married and, live with this white picket fence, we need to pass on, and we need to be the example to glorify God. That's the purpose that he created us to do. And when we don't do that, we're denying the power that he has. And as Wallace says, everybody worships. He said, there is no atheist. We all, because God created us to worship, we all worship, but we will find another source to worship in. And all of these others turn to nothing. They all become self-destructive in our own lives as to where we are. So I just want to encourage us to worship the one and the true God, because he is the one that gives us and provides to us everlasting life. Let's pray.